And my parents came into my room and they're like, we know how bad you feel. We're not going to I hope you've learned your lesson kind of thing. They didn't harp on me too much. They just kind of opened the door and were like, we're very disappointed in you. And we know how bad you feel. So you're going to have to deal with this and see your grandma today.
Hi, and welcome to 5 Random Questions, the show where every question is an adventure. I'm your host, Danny Brown, and each week I'll be asking my guests 5 questions created by a random question generator. The guest has no idea what the questions are, and neither do I, which means this could go either way. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this week's episode. Today's guest is Kattie Laur, an award-winning freelance podcast producer and writer based in Brantford, Ontario. That's in Canada, by the way. She has a lifelong love of public radio and has been clinging to the podcasting space since 2013. Kattie writes a biweekly newsletter for the Canadian podcasting ecosystem, Pod the North, whose regular readers include many media executives from the likes of CBC Podcasts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. She's also just wrapped the first season of our debut podcast, Canardian, which took Canadian podcasters back to their roots to share gossip about their hometowns. So Kattie, welcome to 5 Random Questions.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny. I'm so excited.
You're very welcome. And I feel, obviously we'll get into our 5 questions shortly, but I feel this may be the most important question of the day. And that is, how many zucchinis have you been given by friends and family?
I haven't been given any yet, but I have definitely been doling them out. I have a zucchini plant in my backyard that is producing like crazy. So I am the person sneaking them into everybody's cars and into everybody's purses, zucchinis galore.
And you mentioned on Twitter or X, if you want to call it X, you want to be proper and, go down that road. But you did mention that this is the season. So, you were warning everybody to look out for zucchinis.
Yeah, look out for zucchinis in your passenger car seat. People be sneaking them everywhere.
They'd be sneaking them. I'm going to use that in a t-shirt. They'd be sneaking them everywhere.
Zucchinis be sneaking.
I like it. That could be like a little gif or a meme or something. And I mentioned there, you've just wrapped the first season of Canardian, which, funnily enough, is your debut podcast. Obviously, you've been in the podcasting space for a while, but this is your own debut podcast. So how do you find that?
I am loving it. It's so relaxed. I think making my own podcast for just myself and doing whatever I want on it has been really nice. I don't feel that pressure to do anything as a people pleaser for other people. It just comes down to me and what I'm capable of. So I have been having a great time with it, and I'm already in the works working on season 2. So stay tuned.
Awesome. And it's a real interesting concept. Like you say, you take your guests back to their hometown and their roots, and you talk about some of the gossip, from there. So I'm curious, what of all the episodes that you had and all the guests that you had on and shared like some amazing, breaking news, if you like, it was pretty cool to hear. What was the most outlandish or unexpected fact that came from any of your guests about their hometowns?
Oh, man. There is so much wild stuff that came up about it. I think talking to Nico Stratus about her hometown of Whitehorse was really interesting because I really have no context about what goes on in the northern hemisphere of Canada. And talking to her about the sourdough cocktail, which I had only heard like a little bit about and was more familiar with screeching, which is a East Coast thing in Canada. But the sourdough cocktail, for anyone who isn't familiar, is essentially you go up to Whitehorse and they have a preserved human toe that they put in a shot glass along with a liquor of your choosing, and you have to drink it and the toe has to touch your lips. And then you've been initiated into coming to Whitehorse. And if you eat the toe, you get a massive fine. But there have been people who come in with the money and slam it on the bar and just eat the toe. And there's a variety of different toes. Like, it's so nuts. It's so nuts.
and that's the thing. I mean, the whole concept of the toe, I know like you can do that with like worms or whatever and, tequila, if you want to do it properly, the proper way for tequila. But a toe, like a physical toe being in your drink. Toe. But people are willing to put that in their mouth and pay for the experience. It just, what?
No, I would never do that. I would never
Well, that's it. I mean, if they did, so if they swallow it, what's the process there? Do you wait for this person to come back after nature's taken its course?
No, that's the thing. There's a variety of toes. So people, apparently, like, I guess locals who pass away will sign a waiver to be like, you can have my toe next. Like...
I don't know. Canadians.
They try not to get people to eat the toe. That's why the fine is there, because if you eat it, then they run out of toes, and human toes are hard to come by, I guess.
So there you go, listeners. If you've got a penchant for seeing what a dead person's toe tastes like when mixed with your beverage of choice, you know where to go. And hit Katie up. She can give you some tips on the best recipes, I'm sure.
White Horse Yukon.
Awesome. So, Katie, as is our want, we are on 5 random questions, and we had 2 there to start with, so that's our bonus. So you get 7 random questions today, I guess. Anywho, let's see what the random question generator brings up. Just a reminder to our listeners, as always, these are 100% random questions. I've never seen them before. Katie definitely hasn't seen them before, and we'll just see where this takes us. All right, Katie, I like this one. Question 1. When you're old or older, old. Now I'm going to go old because you're not old. You're not even older at the moment. Katie, when you're old, what do you think children will ask you to tell stories about?
Oh my God, this is such a deep question. I have to really think about this. I mean, I guess the worst case answer is snow and winter and maybe skiing. Actually, that might be my answer to this because growing up, I did ski racing all throughout my early teens and late teens, and traveled around Ontario to different ski races and got to go to different hills. So I don't know. The ski season is already in decline. So I think maybe some kids might be asking me about winter sports, about where it was. And I probably would end up telling them about winter sports too, just because I can't help it. I love winter sports.
I wonder if kids will even have snow when...
That's what I wonder.
You know, I mean, when I'm older, kids will still have snow because I'm old now. So older is probably like 2 months away. But I do wonder, like you say, I know the Canadian snow and skiing scene has been really impacted, by the warmer climate that's been, affecting everything. So you mentioned ski racing. So were you a competitive skier then, or was it competitions that you entered?
Yeah, I was like a semi-competitive racer. So I wasn't like the top of my team by any means. I skied out of a ski club called the Milton Heights Racing Club, just in Milton, Ontario. And that took place at a hill called Glen Eden. And Glen Eden is a pretty small hill just off of the escarpment here in Ontario. And it probably takes you about 30 seconds to ski down and about 15 minutes to go up on the chairlift. It took forever. The Milton Heights Racing Club was a part of, I guess, an entire Ontario racing club competition. So I would go to other different clubs around Ontario, usually every weekend, and go do a race. And races were a variety of either a slalom race course or a super G race course, which were either just depends on how close the gates are all together. And I did that throughout all of my teen years, and it was super fun going to hanging out with my teen friends at different hotels across the province and going to ski races the next day. And I think by grade 12, I wasn't expecting to continue racing after I graduated. So I was just taking it easy and hanging out with my friends. It was great.
And you still ski now then? You still get up to any resorts, etc.? Because Ontario's got some amazing ones, right?
Yeah, I still ski when I can. It's been a little bit tricky over the last few years, but my partner is a snowboarder. So we've been trying to go up skiing and going to Blue Mountain in Ontario, which is like sort of the biggest one Ontario has to offer. But yeah, the ski season has just been really awful the last couple of years. So we just haven't been able to, the timing just hasn't really worked out for us. So hoping to get back on the snow this year at some point. We'll see.
And I guess if the worst comes to the worst, if you ever find a severed toe because it's been frozen in the snow, you know where to take it.
Yep. Just go over to the Yukon and find some snow there.
Perfect. So what would you tell kids, do you think? What would you tell them about your time as a teen or just in skiing in general and why it's such a cool thing to do?
I don't know. I think I would maybe tell them about my just experience as a teenager and a kid doing competition sports. I think it's such a fun part of life if you have the ability to do it. You make so many more friends outside of school. This was, if I was ending up in basically my exact parents' shoes, I would probably be telling children that you don't have to be a copycat of your friends at school. You can make friends in other places and find people that you really get along with in a variety of different places to figure out who you really are. So I think skiing was such a great opportunity for me to be a part of a team and meet people outside of my hometown, because people came from kind of across the Halton region to come to my ski place. So yeah, I think that was a big part of me finding independence, was just making friends in a variety of different places. And I think team sports are a big part of doing that as a kid.
No, definitely. And hopefully kids will still be able to enjoy snow, when they're when they're a bit older and you're telling them and regaling them of these tales. So that'd be awesome to hear for sure.
And if they can't, they can do my other winter sport, which was speed skating, which will take place indoors in a ski arena, which hopefully, or a skating arena, which hopefully will be still around in a number of years.
Yeah, I think they're still popular. Where we live, we have a little outdoor skating rink that they put together. So the community puts that together every winter, and that's getting used all the time by the local kids, etc. So that's good to see.
Amazing.
Definitely. Alrighty, so that was an interesting one to kick the old episode off with.
Yeah.
Let's see where we go from here. Question number 2. What's something that you've tried that you'll never, ever try again?
Oh. These are such hard questions. I immediately thought about food items, but I'm not a very picky person. You know what? If I can get really, really real about this, I think ecstasy. I've tried ecstasy before a couple of times in my early 20s, and it was an experience, but I don't think I will ever do it again. It is the worst. That people will try and convince you to do these types of drugs and tell you, hey, there's no hangover, it's great, it's the happiest you've ever felt in your life. And while you will feel very happy that night, the next day I thought I was going to die. Like straight up it was the worst feeling of all time, and definitely not worth it. So I would say I wouldn't do any drugs other than weed, if I'm going to be totally honest.
No, I hear you. I mean, I was and I've never really shared this before either, so you're getting a bit of me here as well, so kudos there. But yeah, I was I think 31, 32, I think, back in the UK, and I never really tried any hard drugs. The main thing I tried was weed, like you say. Seemed fairly popular. And a bunch of friends said, hey, we're going to this rave down in Manchester, do you want to come? So I thought, yeah, cool, I've never been to a rave.
Ooh, and in the UK, that would be highly tempting, I'm sure.
Oh, it was crazy. It was a really good evening. Like the sounds, the visuals, everything. Great experience. But yeah, same as you, I tried some ecstasy and felt really euphoric on the evening. And that did help with the pulse and bass and all the lights that was going on. But the day after, it's the worst, come down, I guess.
Yeah.
I felt lethargic, didn't want to do anything. It has a really interesting side effect for men as well, which makes a certain part of their body very, very small. So I will leave that. I will leave that there.
I feel like that tells you everything you need to know, though. I feel like your body is just in shock. It's just like, I am so tense, but feel awful. Like the entire day, I don't think I got out of bed until 5 p.m. Like it was brutal. Absolutely brutal. I've never felt so awful in my life.
And I'm curious, if you ever have kids of your own, for example, because obviously you've had experiences of your own, if they said they want to experiment, what would your advice to them be maybe?
This is so funny because I was listening to a podcast yesterday that kind of touched on this a little bit, which was this guy was talking about how he had asked his mom about wanting to try weed. And he said his mom said to him, well, I've tried it before. It just kind of made me really sleepy and eat a lot. And it's not really my thing. And he was like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound very exciting to me. So he just never ended up smoking weed. And he didn't end up trying it until he was in his early 30s because he just had no interest in it. He didn't really care. And to this day, he's not a big drinker. He's definitely not a drug user. He just isn't into that stuff. And not I think that's the ideal outcome for everybody that they want for their child. I don't know if it's necessarily realistic, but I think if I had a kid and they asked me about drugs, I'd probably be just as honest as I'm being right now about how how it was. Like, you feel good the night before, you feel like trash the next day. You can't stop kids from trying something anyway, especially if you say no, they're usually going to they're usually going to do it, I feel like. So I just try and be honest about it and be like, it's up to you, but I wouldn't recommend going crazy about this. And if you want to try it, try a small amount first, kind of thing, and go from there. Or if something is definitely extremely dangerous, I'd be like, this is how dangerous this is. Maybe send them some articles and just be like, read this before you decide to make this decision.
Well, that's it. It's like you say, it's that fine line where you're trying to, not be judgmental because you did the same thing, as a younger person, so they can throw that back at you. But as you say, you don't want to encourage them by trying to put them off too much, because then it's just going to make them rebel. That's what kids do. That's what we did as kids. We rebelled against whatever our parents told us not to do. We would rebel. So I can imagine it being like thankfully, I've not had that discussion yet, or had to have it with my kids. Not looking forward to that. We'll see how that goes. But it should be, I feel like that's almost most things that make you feel great at the time when you're enjoying. So lots of ice cream, for example, all the burgers, all the whatever at a food fest. But then you're going to pay for it the day after, in not a good way. And maybe that's the reason they do that. Maybe they're trying to give you a lesson and say, well, if you're stupid enough to come back the week after having gone through that, more fault you.
This is what happened to me as a kid when I was, I think maybe 15 or 16. I went to a Halloween party and definitely drank way too much red wine. And my mom picked me up from that party and she's like, I remember the door opening and you just falling out of the door. And I was like, oh no. And my parents were like, Katie doesn't drink. She doesn't do any of these bad things. And so that was like the shock of their life, was seeing me just inebriated coming out of a friend's house. And the next day I had to go visit my grandma and I felt like absolute trash. And my parents came into my room and they're like, we know how bad you feel. We're not going to I hope you've learned your lesson kind of thing. They didn't harp on me too much. They just kind of opened the door and were like, we're very disappointed in you. And we know how bad you feel. So you're going to have to deal with this and see your grandma today. So I was like, well, I definitely have learned my lesson, I think.
Well, and self-punishment's often the best kind of punishment because I don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Autonomy punishment.
Autonomy punishment. There you go. That's a great band name. You can see an alt-rock band from Brantford popping up there. Awesome. So there you go, kids. Just so you know. Let's have a look at question number 3. Ooh, now here's an interesting one. Question 3, Katie. What would be harder for you, to tell someone you love them or that you do not love them back?
Ooh, this is such an interesting question. Because in one instance, this is really a question around would you rather be rejected or reject someone? Mm-hmm. And rejection is so hard on both ends. I think it would be harder for me to tell someone I don't love them back. I have pretty high people-pleasing tendencies. And I think when I love something, I really do love something, and I'm pretty obvious about it too. So I think it'd be pretty easy for me to tell somebody I love them. I don't think it's easy for me to fall in love, but I think if I got there, I could definitely tell them. But yeah, to tell them I don't love them back would be extremely difficult.
And have you ever been in that position where you've been with someone and they're clearly more into you than you are into them? And if so, maybe not in a love factor, but certainly in a relationship before love was involved, for example. How did you deal with that? How did you manage that then?
Interesting. Honestly, no. My dating and romantic history has pretty much always been being dumped. And basically just ending up in the friend zone with everybody. But there was one instance that I can think of. I got out of a long-term, a 3.5-year relationship right after university, at the end of university. And that was basically all of my early 20s and late teens. So I was ready to date at that point. So I spent basically a year dating, and that's when I kind of had these instances. And there was one specific person that I can tell you the story about telling them and rejecting them. And actually we went on a lot of really fun dates and had a lot of fun together. And it was clear that he was really into me. And I usually always had to tell him hey, I'm just sort of out here dating. I just got out of a long relationship. I'm not ready to make anything serious. And I think because he kept pestering me a bit, it was easier for me to tell him because it was starting to get a bit annoying. And I wasn't in the headspace where I was taking dating very seriously at that time. And then eventually we went on a date and he made some homophobic remarks, which made rejecting him a lot easier for me. And at the end of that date, I was like, sorry, I don't like you. I don't like that behavior. And we're done here. And he was pretty upset about that. But I was able to be like, no, we're done. That's the biggest instance I have of that.
And it always surprises me. Well, I guess not, because I mean, obviously people are different in what they share openly and what they keep until they feel they can share that, because they might have seen something else in that person. But it always kind of surprises me when people, because most people that are good people, that, you know, are open and accepting, make that very clear. It comes across when you're talking about people, when you're in, you know, environments, etc. So it always surprises me when someone comes out that's been with you a while or around you for a while, comes out with something that's completely opposite to what they must know about you as a person, and just come up straight out and say something like that.
Yeah, it is so interesting. Like, you should know me well enough. We've gone on 4 or 5 dates now, and I'm pretty obvious about the things that I value in life. And it's so interesting when that happens. You're like, wait, have we been have we been on the same page this whole time? Clearly not. It's so wild in that instance too, because you're just like, what has this been this whole time?
Exactly. And that must have come a bit of a surprise for you, because you mentioned you've been on some amazing dates. I guess up until that point, there'd been no sort of red flags or warning signs that this person was homophobic.
Totally. Yeah. And it was a super surprise. And I think this is a super stereotype, but one of the funniest parts to me was that he was a barista at Starbucks, which is like, there are so many people in the LGBTQ community who are baristas and work at Starbucks. I'm like, what is up with you, man? Like, you work amongst these people all the time. Like, what is wrong?
That's crazy. I know my friend over in Toronto likes to go to Starbucks for that very reason. So, you know, who's the cute one that's on like barista duty today? So I hear you. Yeah, that would be a deal breaker for me, 100%. And I think for most people as well.
I would hope so.
Definitely. Hey there, Danny here. This podcast will forever be free to listen to. But if you enjoy 5 Random Questions and get value from the show and want to support it, you can either do that with a donation of your choosing or as a monthly supporter with a 5 Random Questions membership. Choose your preference over at 5randomquestions.com/support. And now, back to this week's episode. Alrighty, so we're going through this. This has been some interesting questions up to now, and very interesting answers. I'm enjoying this. Let's see what we have in store for question number 4. Interesting one. Okay, question 4, if you could disinvent one thing, what would it be?
Patriarchy.
All right.
If we could go way back in time and really look at leadership roles in communities and start working with a matriarchy, I would love to see where the world would be right now.
And it's crazy because you look at, obviously, most of the powerful roles since history, as you mentioned, since like politics began and presidents and all that, have been men. And look where it's got us. You know, you look at all wars that have started. You look at, you know, all the sort of right-wing crap that's coming out. And obviously there are right-wing women as well, as there are men. But if you look at the political leaders and everything like that, it does seem that we need, well, it doesn't seem it is, we need to give a fair shot, and it's about time we give a shot to women leaders. And unfortunately, if you look at some of the women leaders that's been in place, they've been forced out again because of, you know, the old school tie network, unfortunately.
It's so wild the more you think about how deeply embedded male leadership is in society, even like around the world. And I've been learning a lot through some Indigenous podcasts that I've been producing around matriarchy, and just thinking about like how embedded in leadership women have been in the past and then sort of pushed out of that is so interesting to know that like we really don't have any perception of what a women-led society is or would be at this point. Like, we have no idea. I think we could probably look at New Zealand and their prime minister there, but it's because of the nature of it still being within a democratic society, it's still different, right? Like, it could be a totally different type of political leadership style if women had been in charge from the beginning. So like, we really have absolutely no perception. And that's why sci-fi can be such a great genre, because people imagine these things in a variety of different ways. And I think that's what makes you and I Star Wars fans too. So but it's I think it would just be so interesting to see where things would be right now if women had been in charge of all these things. I wonder if colonialism would have even happened.
That's a good question, because I'm obviously, as you mentioned, you work with a lot of Indigenous podcasters, and one of the things I always appreciate about your newsletter is you share water advisories for Indigenous communities. And yeah, it's, again, you go back to, I guess maybe because I'm thinking of the European colonization as well. A lot of that was by decree of Queen Elizabeth, I feel. The first one, is it Queen Victoria, maybe? So, I mean, I do feel the majority is obviously male-driven, because you just have to look at political histories to see what happens there. So it would be curious to see if it would be there, and even if it was there, to what degree? Would it still be there, but to a smaller degree, or would it not be there whatsoever?
Yeah, so interesting. So interesting.
What's funny as well, it's not funny, you mentioned the New Zealand Prime Minister, and she got forced out, if I recall, because she had the audacity to enjoy herself at a nightclub one time. And there was a huge discourse about it, and political opponents were hammering her, and she just got bombarded. And you flip that to the other side, and you look at Justin Trudeau was over in the UK, and okay, he got a bit of flack for being at I don't know if it was a nightclub or a restaurant or something. He was having some fun, relaxing, letting his hair down, when he should have been at this big event. And you're thinking, come on, even if as a politician, there's a time when your day job stops and you can just have fun. And I feel there's a lot more criticism of women leaders and higher standards to live up to there.
Totally. And if you think about Donald Trump, who literally owns party venues and is there all the time, what is he doing the majority of the time? I'm sure it's not work. I'm willing to bet money on that.
I think he's probably eating burgers. I don't know if he's got a bowling alley at Mar-a-Lago. He probably has. He golfs a lot, obviously. Interesting. So disinvent patriarchy.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Not a simple task, but we're imagining here.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting, because I was expecting maybe disinvents or something that's been invented from a technical point of view or whatever, but I like that. I like that a lot. Alrighty, so we've reached question number 5. We've flown through this, and it just shows when you're having fun and a great conversation, time does fly. So let's see how we can wrap this one up, Katie. Okay, question number 5, and I feel I may have an idea here, but I'm not going to put my life on it.
Yeah, definitely don't do that.
I'm not going to put my toonie or loony on it. That's Canadian $1 and $2 for our non-Canadian listeners. Okay, Katie. Question number 5. What do people do too much of today?
Oh, man. These are such hard questions, and there's absolutely no way to prepare for them either.
That's the beauty of randomnicity.
What do people do too much of today? I think people are just too chronically online. I think that's my answer. They do too much of trying to find themselves through the internet. And maybe just, yeah. I don't know if that's a very clear answer, but it would be nice if people felt like they could turn off their phones and just exist in the world again. A podcast I was listening to yesterday, Resurrection, which I have to shout out. It's a wonderful podcast. And the story kind of follows 2 lovers sending letters to each other and having phone calls, living abroad. And I was like, oh man, I remember that being a time when I was a kid going to camp and sending letters to my family and being so disconnected and living in the moment and still kind of communicating when the time was right. And in those instances of communicating with your friends and loved ones through letters and phone calls that aren't as often and easily accessible, it makes those connections just so much more valuable. And this podcast, Resurrection, the first season includes an entire stack of hundreds of love letters. And it's only the one side of these love letters, and seeing kind of how they've interacted and how the breaks between the times are when they were together. So there is no documentation. They were just living in the moment, and we'll never know what that was like. But then you get the letters from when they're separated, and you kind of understand their love story there. And I don't know. I think, not being so chronically online would make people less depressed, would make people hate themselves less, I think, and find more joy in the world, I would hope.
And it's interesting you mentioned a time of, sending letters, exchanging letters, etc. When I was a teen, and we're going back years here, mid-80s, my first serious girlfriend, we ended up being together for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But this was way before the internet, obviously. So we would either be on the phone, like a landline phone with a big cable, no cell phones, no mobile phones or anything, or we'd write each other a letter once a week. Mm-hmm. And now and again, we'd put little mixtapes in with these letters, and we'd have the track listed on the letters and an explanation of why that song was added.
I love this.
It was amazing. And like I say, this has gone back, oh my grief, 40 years now at least. And yeah, now I feel like my kids now, they've just started having their own phones. So they'll text my son, my 14-year-old son's got his first girlfriend. Oh, second girlfriend, actually.
Oh,
yeah. A little bit of a player on that one. But second girlfriend, but they're texting all the time. And I feel that's great, but I feel there's something just missing, to your point of, I was watching the Glastonbury Festival. BBC kindly streamed it for the first time, and they streamed a Coldplay concert. And I was watching that, and at the end, they were doing their encore. And Chris Martin, they were doing Galaxy of Stars, I think it's called, or Universe of Stars, Sky of Stars, the song that's got stars in it. And he said before he started, okay, this is just going to be me, the band, and you guys. So put your phones in your pockets, put them all away, and we're just going to be in the moment and sing this song together and be a 100,000-piece band. And everybody did that. You watched it, and it was amazing. And I was getting goosebumps just watching that performance because nobody was on their phone.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, the novelty of connection is almost gone now because it just feels so accessible, at least in the Western world. So it's just so interesting that you almost take your relationships and the people that you meet for granted at this point because they're just so accessible and easy to reach. I think that. And also, I've made a conscious effort, too, because I love taking photos and videos and everything. And with my phone, it's been so easy to do that. And especially like great quality photos and videos, too. Like, phones are so amazing. And I've purposely tried to have like a little bit of a mindset shift in that I'm taking photos and videos for myself and not to post online. And I still like look through all of the photos that I've taken over the number of years on like my Facebook albums and all the old photos I've taken. So I love looking at photos and videos. So now I'm just like trying to purposely take my mind out of like, this is something I want to post and share with the world. And this is just something that I want to like look at later and document for another time. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is just like making sure that I track things in my life for myself future down the line when I can look back at my life and not feeling the pressure to share with everybody all the time.
And I wonder if so next year, I think the new curriculum in Ontario for schools, elementary and high school, there's a restriction on phone usage and social media usage in class, etc. I wonder if that'll help maybe encourage more of our kids to be, obviously parents have got the job to encourage and educate the dangers of online, but while encouraging, but we don't want to stop you using technology. We just want to use it effectively, like you mentioned. So I wonder if that curriculum might help, do you feel, for moving forward?
I would hope so. I mean, I think if anything, like just living in the moment a little bit more, it will help with that. Help people focus on classroom content rather than things to post and looking online all the time. Yeah, we're just so used to absorbing so much content at the same time now. I feel like it might be a little bit tricky for people to get used to it again. But I have like a bunch of canoe trips planned this summer and cannot wait to just like be somewhere where I have absolutely no internet access. Don't feel the pressure of people reaching out to me and people I have to get back to. Don't feel the pressure of like needing or wanting to post things. I can just live in the moment, hang out with my family, and just enjoy life. Ready for that.
And canoeing is perfect for that. getting out on the water, just because it's so like going back to basics of humanity, right? It's just like, we're very fortunate. We have a lake about 20 minutes walk from our house. So I've got a little sort of blow up inflatable kayak. So I'll take that up, just get it off and then disappear for a couple of hours. It's like, God, just love it.
That sounds perfect.
And I guess it's like, hopefully, I mean, the problem is the genie's out the bottle when it comes to tech, but hopefully, like you say, if we can shift mindsets and people start to appreciate, you can still use tech, but now just be in this moment for now.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. I think, sorry, not to keep ragging on this, but I think people have just gotten so stuck into like everything is content mindset now, where I'm thinking specifically of this woman that I was watching a YouTube video about on TikTok about, she was making a video sitting in her car about how she couldn't reach her son and how how he was supposed to be in detention at school, but she couldn't get a hold of anybody at the school. And people like, why are you filming this video? Go to the school already. Like, go find your son. It's just everything is content, and people just have to make things for no reason and go on TikTok, make a video and ask people for advice when you should have friends and family close enough to you to give you sound advice with the context and the nuance of who you are as a person. So I don't know. It's just so weird that people just go online for everything now.
Well, it's like the people, just to elaborate on your point there as well, it's like people, they're filming a fight, or they're filming a car crash and the person's still in the car and you're filming it and you're thinking, why aren't you calling 911? Why aren't you helping? Is it, it's like clicks and views seem to be, pervasive in our society, unfortunately. That, again, hopefully, as, more people realize the dangers of online and too much connectivity, hopefully we'll start to peel some of that back for us.
Yeah, I hope our relationships have value again sometime soon.
Unless they're homophobic, obviously.
Exactly.
Then get rid of these ones.
Toss them in the trash.
So, Katie, as I mentioned, I really enjoyed these 5 question and answers. In all 100% fairness, I always do this every week. I feel it's only fair that you get to ask your own random question of me, because I have put you through the ringer for the last 30 minutes or so.
Okay. What is the worst food combination you've ever tried?
Oh, that is like, I mean, I'm Scottish, so there's probably some really bad food combinations anyway. Food combinations. I feel there's something to do with a breakfast that I had in the US, because the US has got some interesting breakfast choices, if that's the right word. And I feel there was something where it was you know what it is? It is breakfast, but you can also have it for lunch, etc. And I was trying to think of what the food was, and I still don't understand it. I'm sure, I know a lot of people do like it. What's the fascination with fried chicken on waffles, and sometimes with some ice cream at the side?
Oh, with the ice cream on the side?
With the ice cream at the side.
Oh, listen, I think it's just like the sweet and savory combo sometimes. And this is the thing with sweet and savory, and I'll go out and say it. Sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. And I think chicken and waffles is one of those things where you have to have it has to be perfect. The chicken can't be dry. It has to be juicy because it has to kind of go along with the waffle, which is also often a dry food. So you have to cook it perfectly for a chicken and waffles to hit. Otherwise, it's just kind of nasty and you'd prefer to eat them separately. But otherwise, like savory and sweet, they do go together sometimes.
Sometimes. I will have to take your word for it. I always think of waffles.
Theory. There's no scientific evidence to that.
I just think of waffles as a dedicated like breakfast thing. So maybe you have waffles, and my daughter has waffles with strawberries on it, sometimes bananas, some little bit of syrup, whatever, and that's her breakfast. She likes that. Whereas other times, I don't know, maybe you do put ice cream on top of a warm waffle, but to take like a greasy, I guess it depends how greasy the chicken is as well.
I don't think I would combine fried chicken and ice cream.
Well, no. I mean, we Scottish people have some weird things like fried Mars bars. Never had one. Have no interest in having one ever. So I can't really speak as a cultural, example. But yeah, I just can't, like chicken, waffle, ice cream all in the same plate. That was bizarre to see.
Interesting answer.
Interesting question. Thank you for that. So, Kerry, as I mentioned, I really enjoyed this. For people that want to learn more about you and your role, what you do as a podcast producer, your newsletter, your Canardian podcast, and, getting ready for season 2, etc., where's the best places for them to connect with you online and check all that stuff out?
Yeah, the best places to connect with me online are through my newsletter, of course. So you can go to podthenorth.com and subscribe to it. And then whatever email newsletter you get from me, you can reply right back to it and it goes directly to me. Or you can follow me on Instagram at podthenorth and just DM me there and send me all of your cool Canadian podcasting news.
Awesome. And as always, I'll be sure to leave those links in the show notes. So whatever podcast app you're listening on, be sure to check them out. They'll link all out to these resources. So again, Kerry, thanks for appearing on 5 Random Questions.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Danny.
Thanks for listening to 5 Random Questions. If you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to follow for free on the app you're currently listening on, or online at 5randomquestions.com. And if you feel like leaving a review, well, that would make me happier than that time I got Darth Vader's autograph at my local supermarket as a 13-year-old boy. Because yes, Darth Vader appears at Scottish supermarkets in full garb, signing autographs for 13-year-old boys. You know it's true. But seriously, leaving a review or recommending it to your friends would make my day. Until the next time, keep asking those questions.